Allen Mendenhall. Welcome to Bookish Questions with Cultural Debris.
Allen, thanks for having me.
You have a new novel just coming out, and it's called A Glooming Peace This Morning. So tell me a little bit about the book and tell me where you got the title.
Well, the title comes from Romeo and Juliet, and the book is a Southern Gothic version of Romeo and Juliet in some ways. It's obviously not a perfect match, but it's set in a fictional town of Andalusia in a fictional Magnolia County. And when I told my mom about the setting, she said, "No, those aren't fiction. Those are real places." I said, "No, Mom, those names exist on the map in places, but this city and this county are entirely fictional. I would know. I created them." But it tells the story of forbidden love, and actually the story is predicated on a case that I read in law school. I read it during my 1L year, and I had just written a short story, and the short story didn't quite hang together because I introduced too many characters in it. And I thought, well, maybe this will be the basis for some future novel one day. Well, I read this case and never went back to it again because I thought if I reread the facts and the holdings and the issues that it might muddy the memory of the case. And I was writing based on sort of the imperfectly remembered version of the case. But that case, which was in a criminal law class, inspired sort of the backdrop of this novel. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. Sort of like Harper Lee, when she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, took the manuscript to Lippincott Publishers, and the editors there said, well, this is neat. You got a bunch of short stories, but this doesn't hang together as a novel. And so she went back, and that's when she came up with the Tom Robinson plot and the legal plot. That's a very similar thing happened to me, except for that the legal plot came to me during law school. Well, guess what? It's been a long time since I went to law school, so it took a long time to write this book, which is a very, very short book. But it was because I just worked in fits and starts. I would do a little bit here, a little bit there, and it took over a decade to come together. And really, it's just barely longer than a novella.
So that's one of those, as the old saying goes, don't let facts get in the way of a good story. So you don't want to go back. You don't want to go back and get too many of the actual facts from the case. You just want to let it sort of linger in your mind.
That's right. Yeah. In the case, I mean, the book, it involves some pretty heavy themes. And as I mentioned earlier, it's Southern Gothic. So it comes out of that tradition with Faulkner and O'Connor and Tennessee Williams and Carson McCullers and Truman Capote. And as with all sort of Southern Gothic novels, it deals with those themes of sort of the juxtaposition of the genteel and the grotesque, where the story is revealing something of the underbelly of the genteel society. There is a contrast between the individual, in particular the narrator, whose name is Cephas, which we learn in the early chapters is a mix of both the biblical reference to Kaphos, the Greek, and Bocephus, as in Hank Williams Jr. So the nickname has a sort of a double association. But the themes of being isolated from society, and I use terms a lot to refer to the town, like multitude, crowd, throng, masses, mob, and sometimes the town acts as an undifferentiated unit of people, but there are these central figures, three boys in particular, besides Cephas, who's the narrator, Lump, Brett, and Michael, and those are his closest friends. And like To Kill a Mockingbird, where there is, there are stories going on, and then there's the legal plot, the legal case. This has stories involving these young boys as they encounter different characters in the town. But then there's also this legal case going on in the background as well. So very similarly framed.
Yeah, I saw that. So the early blurbs, there were various references to Kill a Mockingbird, and of course, you and I had an extended conversation a year or two ago about your first book, which I do have here handy, which people should also grab. Not fiction, but it's a collection of your essays. But your family has a connection with Harper Lee and the setting of To Kill a Mockingbird. If you could just kind of briefly touch on that and the connection of your new story with that classic.
Well, sure. Briefly, my grandfather grew up in Monroeville, Alabama, with Harper Lee, and he called her Nell. And he also, of course, had encounters with Truman Capote, numerous encounters with Truman Capote. And when I was a young boy, he would tell me stories about things that he did with Harper Lee and things he did with Truman Capote. I don't think he was particularly fond of Truman Capote, the young boy. Admired him as an author and was proud that this figure who was associated with Monroeville and with Alabama had made a name for himself. But I think he was the type of figure that the other boys made fun of, and he would sort of just write in the little I don't know if it was a cafe or what it was, but he would go in there and write and drink Cokes, and the papers would just stack up on the table, and the other boys would look in the window and kind of make fun of him. And they'd ask him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm writing a book." And the other boys thought that was ridiculous because they didn't think anybody from Monroeville, Alabama could write a book, but they were very wrong about that. So my family's connections with that region run deep. With Magnolia County and Andalusia in particular, I had several cities in mind. I had my hometown of Marietta in mind. I had Morgantown, West Virginia, where I lived in mind. I had Opelika, Alabama in mind. I had all kinds of small towns in Alabama in mind where I had been for family reunions or weddings or funerals over the years. I had Madison, Georgia in mind. I had, there are just so many different small towns that I had in mind. So there's not really one place. I know there will be a temptation to say, oh, this sounds as though he's writing about X or Y. But really, it's just an odd amalgamation of images that are just in my head from different places. And I just sort of picked and chose from whatever was resonating at that time when I depicted the city.
So this book comes out in November, which by the time this releases may already be out. So it is from the University of West Alabama Press. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it has an imprint called Livingston Press, but it is the University of West Alabama Press with that particular imprint for works of creative works of novels and creative nonfiction.
Oh, very nice. So are there any other stories percolating in your head that we should look forward to in the future?
Well, interestingly enough, I read another case a few years ago and thought, I don't want to get into the true crime area the way sort of Truman Capote did with In Cold Blood. But I think if that case were to inspire another story, it's a possibility. My difficulty is balancing all my other writing with the fiction writing. So if I can just stay alive long enough, I think that maybe we'll see another novel. But it took a long time to write this very short one. So it will just be a matter of longevity for me. If I can just stay healthy and stay alive, it will probably eventually get there. If not, it will just be lost in some computer file.
Well, now that you've done it, though, you can. So
that's right.
The next one won't be as hard. Before we go, I do have to compliment your 6-stack barrister bookcase over your shoulder there. I've been designated as an admirer of barrister bookcases, and that is a handsome one. And you as a barrister are actually putting it to its native use.
Well, that belonged to my great uncle and to his father, who practiced law in downtown Opelika. And my great uncle had several of these outside in a garage. He had repurposed his garage as an office. and he just had barristers' bookshelves everywhere and old law books everywhere. And some of these old law books are my great-great-grandfather's.
Oh,
I wish
wow.
I could have gone back in time and acquired all of them, but my great uncle's been gone for many, many years now, and so the books that he owned have been distributed to libraries and family and other people, and so I don't actually even know the whereabouts of all those books, but he had some really special volumes in there.
Well, it is a handsome bookcase that should last for another century to come at least.
Well, thank you. I hope so. If it doesn't tip over in here when I get too many students.
Well, they're built to last, so I'm glad to see it being put to good use. Allen Mendenhall, thanks for being on Bookish Questions.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.